Hello and welcome to episode 16 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. Today's show has turned out a lot differently than anticipated. Our regular listeners are familiar with Marissa from Chicago, known on Twitter as @ThinkMickeyBlog. Recently, the two of us sat down to discuss her first trip back to Walt Disney World since the parks closed in March of 2020. This trip, which happened earlier this month, had Marissa getting her first look at the safety measures in place since the parks reopened, taking part in Star Wars Day at Disney's Hollywood Studios, and even having lunch with me at Tiffin's, one of the best restaurants on Disney property. This conversation was so interesting and fun that I decided to split it up into 2 episodes. So the first part of that conversation will be today's episode. Before we get started, please like, subscribe, and comment to help the show. Also, share this show with anybody you think would love to hear more about Disney, Universal, or travel in general. Of course, I'm also an authorized Disney travel planner. In addition to Walt Disney World and Disneyland, I can also help you plan your next vacation to Universal Orlando Resort, Universal Hollywood, or just about any location in the world. My services are always 100% free to you, and it really does help the show and me. I currently have clients ready to head to New York, Rome, and other locations throughout the world. Contact me at rick@eartotheirtravel.com, rick@eartotheirtravel.com, and 727-507-3123. That's 727-507-3123. For just a $200 deposit, I can lock down your next Walt Disney World vacation. All right, now it's time to welcome Marissa. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
I am doing very well. You recently came back from a trip to Walt Disney World, which was your first one since reopening last year. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was your first one since February of 2020?
Yes, that's correct. The last time I was there was February 2020 for the Princess Run Disney weekend. So it's been quite some time.
The first thing we have to mention is a lot of the rules, even since you just got back, have changed. So you were there before you could take mask off outside while walking around. You were there when it was still 6 feet of distance for all of the rides and everything like that. So in this fast-moving world that is 2021, things have even changed since Marissa was there, but just safety-wise, the first thing I want to discuss with you, because obviously if you waited this long to go back, you were concerned about safety. How did you feel? Were there things that you noticed that you liked? Were there things that you noticed that you didn't like?
Honestly, overall, I did feel very safe. I did notice cast members constantly cleaning everything. I feel like everywhere I turned, there was a cast member wiping something down or cleaning something up. And that was really great to see because you could tell that they really did have that focus on keeping everything as clean and sanitized as possible. Another great thing that I loved and I hope sticks around was the distanced buses. It was so nice being guaranteed to have a seat and not leaving a park at 10 p.m. and ending up, standing for that bus ride the whole time while you're crammed in with a bunch of other sweaty people who have been at the park all day. So that was a nice plus. The one area that I did notice that guests were just kind of getting a little careless on was the distancing in lines. And from what I've seen, from what other people have said about their trips, that seems to be a common thing where it's been going on for a while, where people have kind of been crowding in lines just depending on who you're around. There were some lines where everyone was very respectful, standing on the distanced markers. And there were some lines where people were right up against you and you're looking at them going, do you see the sign on the floor? What are you doing here? But it happened a couple times. It was a little frustrating. Nothing big, not a big deal, I would say. And now, it's down to 3 feet. So maybe guests will listen to that a little more.
So I'm hoping that by the end of this episode, people won't think I'm being too negative, because this is basically the one negative thing I'm going to say about anybody. But that is definitely the thing, going back to the theme parks, especially over the last few months, that has really started to bother me. People just not paying attention to the markers. We're in the middle of a global pandemic and we're trying to keep everybody safe. But honestly, even if we weren't, I like my space in line. Like, you don't have to be all up in my business. So it is something that has been bothering me as people have paid less and less attention to those markers. So I hear you on that. And it's something that I have definitely complained about, like screamed into a pillow when I've gotten home at the end of the day, because you don't expect the cast members, or if it's Universal, the team members, to be enforcing this like it's kindergarten. Like, we should all be adults, except, I mean, there's kids there too, but we should all be adults in paying attention to what's happening. And I don't care if a kid's running around a little bit too much. Like, I understand that, but just setting that tone of stopping at the markers is always really good. I'm a little worried how the changes are going to affect that, because I think that now the more things get loose, the more people even get looser.
Yeah, I think people will start to kind of not let their guards down, but kind of stop being as aware, as they don't have as many reminders to be aware. So it will definitely be interesting to see what happens.
But overall, you did feel safe. Even on indoor rides and things like that, you weren't super concerned.
No, honestly, I did feel really safe. It was great being on the indoor rides and having like a row to myself, and not being sat with another party. That's definitely something that I think should stick around, because that added to my safety. I wasn't as on top of people. And I did get pretty lucky a few times where I ended up in like the first row of an attraction, which I know means nothing in the grand scheme of things, but it made me feel a little better, just in the sense that I was breathing the open air. There wasn't anyone right in front of me. Um, but I feel like that's just my own personal perception of things.
If they start putting people next to people who aren't in their party, that's going to be really hard for me to get used to again, like riding Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. I'm 6'4". I've got legs everywhere. And before all this happened, I remember there was a time I rode Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. They put me next to a guy who was like 6'7". And the two of us are just like trying to look over our knees to try to see the ride, because it's crammed in so tight. And yeah, definitely when you go by yourself and you can have the entire row to yourself, or even if it's just a bench like on something like Big Thunder Mountain, or something like that, it's going to be hard.
It definitely will. And for Seven Dwarfs specifically, that just reminded me there was a trip I had a couple years ago where I got sat on Seven Dwarfs with a family. It was a mom, dad, and their kid. And all three of them had those like matching Disney shirts on. And then there was me sitting next to the dad in the back. I was like, well, I hope you like your picture. Sorry, I kind of snuck in there.
Well, that's what happened to me in the story that I was talking about. So it was a family of three. I understand what the father was doing. He didn't want to put his wife or his child with a strange man. It was just so super uncomfortable, but that's a little bit of a side tangent. So what park did you choose to make your first day back?
I went to Epcot right away, because half the reason I wanted to be there was to finally experience the Flower and Garden Festival. And the other half of the reason that I planned this trip when I did was May 4th. But we'll get to that. But I wanted to start it off at Epcot, started off tasting those different foods that they had. And being at Pop Century, it was really easy to get over there just taking the Skyliner. So I figured that would also be, first day you get there, you're kind of discombobulated getting off the plane, getting to your resort, everything. And then it was easy to just grab a Skyliner and not worry about a bus.
So I've been hearing a lot of different experiences for different people. I don't think people are interpreting the experiences differently. I think they're having different experiences when it comes to Magical Express. So since you did take Magical Express from the airport and back to the airport, did you have any problems with it, or did everything go smoothly as it has in the past?
It was definitely a longer line than there has been in the past, but I feel like that's pretty understandable considering they have to do distancing and everything on the buses. So you can't fill them as much as you used to be able to. But I waited probably 25 minutes for a bus, which really is not that bad. I'd say that's pretty on par with what it's been, pre everything. Um, and I got Disney buses, or I had a Disney bus on a Magical Express to my resort. On the way back, I had a non Disney bus. But that bus driver was actually very friendly and chatty and talking about Disney World more than the other bus driver was. So I got lucky and I had very positive experiences both times. But yeah, I've definitely heard some horror stories of people waiting like 90 minutes to get on the Magical Express, which is just wild.
You get there, and just for people listening, Magical Express is going to be going away at the end of this year. It will not exist starting January 1st of 2022. We're just waiting on more information about what is going to replace it, how people are going to get from MCO to Walt Disney World. There will be a way, and we'll figure all that out as things progress. We're not even halfway through the year yet, so we're just not going to worry about it right now. So, Marissa, I want to know, because this is what I was thinking of when I returned to the parks for the first time after the closure. You get into Epcot. I guess if you took the Skyliner from Pop Century, you entered at International Gateway, so you entered right into World Showcase. After all that time, could you just talk about those emotions a little bit, about getting back to this place that you love so much?
Absolutely. It was actually kind of funny because when I first got there, I expected everything to like hit me and just be really emotional. And I was kind of just in disbelief for a little while where I walked around International Gateway and I was like, oh, it's really pretty. Oh, look at these topiaries. Look how nice it is. I grabbed a Dole Whip, I sat down and I ate it and I was like, okay, I'm really here, but it still hadn't really sunk in yet. And then after I ate my Dole Whip, I made my way over to Soren. And riding that, it finally hit me like, oh my gosh, I'm really back here. And, this is really happening. I'm finally back and I'm on Soren, which is a ride that I absolutely love. And then I got a little emotional. Honestly, I was like, holy cow, I'm just so happy to be here. And then, then I really was like, okay, vacation, I'm back, ready to experience everything the parks have to offer as much as I possibly can in 4 days.
And I know there's a lot of talk on Twitter, which can be extremely toxic sometimes, about people who cry when they get to the parks for the first time, all the people walking into Disneyland. And I think one thing that people don't quite comprehend is it's not just that it's Disney and it's these theme parks that we love, but we know how crazy it has to be for them to close for even a day or two. Like, hurricanes will roll through and they won't close Disney World. Only big hurricanes roll through and they close it. So the fact that this happened was such a big deal, and that it was closed, and now to go back and experience these things, and everything isn't normal yet. No matter what recent news might suggest, but everything isn't normal yet. But just to sort of get to feel these senses of normalcy, like riding Soren, getting a Dole Whip, all those things just make you feel like, okay, now I remember this. You get that muscle memory back a little bit. So since you wanted to go to Epcot first and experience a little bit of a taste of Epcot International Flower and Garden Festival, I'm sure the fact that Epcot is open later than the other parks also probably played a big part in that. What were some of the highlights of the festival for you? What were some of the food items that you really loved?
Well, one of my favorite items at Epcot wasn't actually part of the festival. It was the poutine in Canada, and that's just been on my list for a really, really long time. So I was glad that I finally had the chance to stop and eat it and enjoy it. And I enjoyed that more than I was expecting. It was very good. It was a nice savory dish. There was a lot of food. You get a lot of fries with it. I couldn't finish it. But my favorite of the festival foods was probably the burnt ends slider. It's in the festival favorites booth. And that's one that I had heard a lot about and was looking at it. And it's like this bun and it's piled with meats. And then it's got like a pickle and a little like mini hot dog on top of it. And I was looking at it and I was like, okay, is this going to just be too much? Like it was hot out. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to regret getting this. But oh my gosh, it was delicious. All the flavors worked so well together, and it wasn't too much at all. It was small enough where it was, it was filling, but it wasn't stuffing. So you could still walk around afterward and feel good about it. You're not walking around going, okay, hold on, I think I overate. But I really enjoyed that.
So it was like a brisket with a hot dog on top?
Brisket and burnt ends, and then it had like a queso sauce on it, and then on top of the like poking through the bun was a toothpick, and on the toothpick was like a little mini like cocktail hot dog and a giant piece of pickle. It was definitely a presentation when it was delivered to me. I was like, wow, this is quite the slider.
And I like how Marissa keeps it so family friendly that she doesn't call it a cocktail weenie. She calls it a cocktail hot dog, but that's okay. That's pretty funny. Yeah, I have really been enjoying the Flower and Garden Festival this year. I think a lot of the food items are pretty good. I actually had, which is part of the festival, right there at Refreshment Port, I believe it's called, which is right by the Canada Pavilion as well. They have a vegetarian sausage poutine right now as part of the festival, and that's really, really good. That's one of those things that's filling without being overly filling. You said this is your first time ever doing Flower and Garden.
Well, kind of. I was technically at Epcot in 2017 during Flower and Garden, but that was my first time back to the parks since I was 9 years old. So I didn't know too much about it. I wasn't as like into the theme park community as I am now. And I kind of was like walking around going, oh, there's topiaries, and didn't really experience it as I wanted to. I tried none of the food since realizing what I've missed. I've really wanted to go back and be able to fully experience it and not just kind of blow it off like I had, a few years ago. It was a little bit of a redemption trip for me.
That kind of reminds me of my first trip to the Food and Wine Festival in 2015. I wasn't nearly as ingratiated into the theme park community as I am now, and I was doing a cross country trip. I just thought I would stop and spend 2 days at Walt Disney World because I hadn't done it since I was like 25, and before that it was like when I was 12. So I'm like, I'll just go to Epcot, and I love Epcot. And then they had all these food booths, and I'm like, what is this? This is the greatest thing that's ever happened in the history of time. So I can feel you on that, and being surprised by those festivals and then not being prepared for them. So you have to go back and be like, I need to know what this is like to really fully experience it. So besides that, what else were you able to get done at Epcot? How did you feel the crowds were the day that you were there? When you were there, it was really hard to get a reservation for the parks. Now you're dealing with no fast passes for the first time in a really long time. Like, what were all of those experiences like for you?
The crowd levels actually weren't too bad. I think Frozen was like a 40-minute wait pretty much all day. Not having been at the parks at any point since they reopened and not experiencing any of those really low crowds, it still felt like a pretty low crowd day to me. The last time I was in Epcot, Frozen was like a 90-minute wait. So to see it at less than half that was, it felt pretty nice. So that aspect was good. It was definitely hot out. I have never been like this time in May before. I went earlier in May, last time I was there. It was definitely hotter than I was kind of expecting, but feel like I adapted to that pretty quickly. It was nice that it was nice and warm and I was wearing like shorts and a t-shirt instead of, I came back home and I was wearing sweatshirts again because it's cold here. Not having fast passes, I feel like I can't as accurately speak on. I did use the DAS pass. Being able to wait in that kind of like virtual line was a lot easier. I didn't have to deal with standing in the lines. That made a big difference to me personally, but I know that a lot of people, don't have that pass, so they're still standing in the lines.
That actually reminded me of something that I saw you say a few days ago on Twitter that really struck me and I really appreciated. So I just want to say something about that for a second. The DAS pass is a disability pass. There can be a lot of talk, especially in Facebook, in a lot of Disney groups, but even sometimes on Twitter, in the Disney community, a lot of people thinking, oh, I don't know why these people are using the fast pass lane. They don't look like they're disabled. You could look at Marissa and you would have no idea that she needs to use a DAS pass. And it's like totally her private business why she needs one. But you can't judge that. So just because you see somebody that's walking in that fast pass line when you know there aren't fast passes and they don't look to you like they need it, that doesn't mean that that's the case. So please just try to be cognizant of that and don't judge people because you don't know everybody else's experience. Nobody's cutting the line with a DAS pass. They're waiting the exact same amount of time you are. They just don't have to actually stand in the line. So they are not getting on every ride with no wait. They literally have to wait for the ride to experience it. And it can be a lifesaver. So please don't judge.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you saying that because it's true. I almost didn't activate the pass for this trip because I didn't want to deal with any sort of judgment or people saying like, oh, she doesn't really need this. And I did get a couple of looks when I was walking through the line. I noticed a few people, like looking at me and then turning to someone else and being like, why is she going this way? And, she's just walking right up. But yeah, like you said, I did wait. They give you a return time. You go up to the ride and you ask for a return time. And so if the ride's 70 minutes, you wait 70 minutes. And then after that, you get to go up and you walk through the alternate queue. So you are still waiting that time. And like you said, it was a real lifesaver for me. I would not have been able to do the vast majority of the rides I did on this trip without that pass. So it was a big deal for me. But yeah, I feel like I can't accurately say how the lines were without fast passes just based on that. But the waits weren't too bad.
Walt Disney World is for everybody, so please just remember that, and we're all trying to just have a great vacation. So, your second day, this was the entire reason you made this trip, or one of the two reasons that you made this trip, because you were able to snag that ever so elusive park reservation for Disney's Hollywood Studios on May the 4th.
Yeah, this trip actually came about when I saw that Disney had released a deal and I was looking at it and I saw that these dates fell in line and I went on the reservation system and I grabbed a reservation and I went, okay, now that I have this Hollywood Studios reservation on May 4th, I have to do this. I can't pass up this opportunity to be here on this day. And I am so glad that I was able to make it work because it was seriously just beyond incredible being in Galaxy's Edge on May the 4th with everyone around who was also huge Star Wars fans. People were dressed up. It was like 100 degrees by 11 a.m. and people were walking around in full costumes with like full sleeves and capes, and it was so much fun. It was just such a great atmosphere in that area.
So did you take part in any of the big experiences? I know later in the evening they were doing the lightsaber pictures in front of the Millennium Falcon, or were you just sort of walking around the park, enjoying your time, people watching almost?
Yeah, I was just there to soak it all in. I just wanted to try to take in as much of that atmosphere as I could, which was a running theme throughout my trip in general, but on that day, I really wanted to just experience all those people kind of riding that same high of like, this is so cool, and really feeling that. So I just kind of walked around. I enjoyed people watching. I enjoyed chatting with some people, saying, oh, wow, I love your costume. You're dressed so cool. Or, chatting with people about different Star Wars things as we're, standing in line for something. It really was an incredible experience. And if you're a Star Wars fan and you can manage to, well, who knows what the future of the reservation system will look like. But if you can manage to get to Galaxy's Edge on May 4th, highly recommend it.
And I'm just going to say 2022 packages are on sale now. So Rick at eartotheirtravel.com if you're looking to try to make that happen for May 4th of next year. Thank you for that little lead in there, Marissa. I appreciate it. Now, you were also able to do something that is quite hard on a lot of days. At 1 o'clock, you were able to make your Rise of the Resistance boarding group. So did you miss out at the 7 o'clock window, or did you not even try at the 7 a.m. window?
No, I missed out at the 7 a.m. window. I think that I should have done a little more research in terms of what the data and Wi-Fi speeds in my room were. I think if I really wanted to make that 7 a.m. group, I would have had to leave my room and then kind of wander somewhere to find better speeds, because I had pretty slow, even resort Wi-Fi in my room. So I did miss that group. But I also think that due to the nature of the day, I mean, it went like that. It was just gone within, not even half a second of them being open.
So it was May the 4th, and obviously they're always hitting capacity at Hollywood Studios anyway, so I'm not even sure if May the 4th played that much of a difference, except for the fact that you probably have a lot more people who are regulars at Galaxy's Edge who wanted to be there, so they probably know a lot of the tricks. There are a couple things that I just want to say. I think staying on property was a great idea for Marissa. I think it is easier to get one when you are staying on property. I know they don't tell you that they're doing this, but I think there's a little bit of finagling behind the scenes that helps people staying on property get the 7 a.m. Rise of the Resistance boarding group. And we'll talk about these boarding groups a lot in the future. If you don't know what we're talking about, just pay attention to the basics. The other thing that I think actually hurt you probably, because it has hurt me in the past, I believe, is it's not easy to get one person for a boarding group. I think you are much more likely, if you're a group of 4 or a group of 8, to get your group, because then they can fill up all the seats in the vehicle. I have never been a part of a group of 4 that has not gotten a boarding group, but I have not gotten a boarding group by myself a number of times since reopening. I was always able to get it before reopening, but a few times since. However, at the 1 o'clock time, you did score a boarding group, so why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I got really lucky and was able to score a group at the 1 o'clock drop. I had been keeping my eye on the time, and I was actually eating lunch right at 1, and so it was like 12:59, and I was looking over at my phone, and I was waiting and waiting, and I had it all pulled up and ready as I have my Ronto wrap in my other hand. I was like, wow, I'm really feeling Star Wars right now. And right at 1, I hit join, and I was able to get a group, and I was very lucky that the ride ran smoothly all day and there was no downtime or anything like that. So they were able to get through a number of those backup boarding groups. But it did say that my time was like estimated return was like 5 hours. So at that point, I was like, all right, I hope I'll be able to make it. I don't know if I'll be able to make it, but I got lucky and like an hour before park closed, I was able to get on the ride.
All right, so I think that's where we're going to cut things off in this episode of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. We will continue our conversation with Marissa next week. She'll talk about her first visit to Magic Kingdom, seeing the repainted Cinderella Castle, and seeing character cavalcades. She'll discuss riding Star Wars Rise of the Resistance for the second time and how Disney's Animal Kingdom is quickly becoming her favorite WDW theme park. We will also wrap up that episode with a dining review from Tiffin's in Animal Kingdom. Like, comment, and subscribe to help us grow the show. Also, join me on social media for pictures, blogs, live streams, videos, and so much more. Facebook.com/ear-to-their-Rick, Twitter.com/Rick_ear, Instagram.com/RickEar, 2 there, and Twitter.com/TGTT podcast. For a free, no obligation quote on a Walt Disney World vacation, email me, rick@eartotheirtravel.com, or call 727-507-3123. This has been episode 16 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Marissa will finish her discussion about Walt Disney World next Thursday. Until then, have a great week.